we have the chairs of NISASC and NICC with us, and we also have the deputy chair of the Resident Doctors Committee. So we'll start off with Leanne. Do you want to go ahead?
Thanks, Trish. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Leanne Davison. Trish says I'm the chair of the Northern Ireland SAS Committee, and I'm an associate specialist in ICU in Belfast.
David?
I'm David Farron. I'm a microbiology consultant based in the Northern Trust, and I chair the Northern Ireland Consultants Committee. And if you're on the WhatsApp groups, I'm the one that's constantly pestering you, telling you to get your vote in the post.
Helen?
Hi everyone, I'm Helen Kerr. I'm an ST4 in emergency medicine, currently working at McGelvin ED, and I'm deputy chair for NI Resident Doctors Committee.
Good. Thank you, everyone. You will see there we have an agenda for this evening. We will be covering why we call this ballot on industrial action, what we're seeking to achieve, and why you need to vote yes. What we all need to do to get this ballot over the line, and how you can help the campaign do that. And we will also have some important dates for you to make note of. So why have we called a ballot on industrial action? Well, you will note that the DDRB has recommended a sub-inflationary annual pay award for doctors and dentists of 3.5% for 26 and 27. Now, this was not high or credible enough. We didn't think so anyway, to make any meaningful progress towards full pay restoration. We want to make sure Northern Ireland is a place where doctors want to stay and pursue their careers, and we can only do this and retain and attract doctors if the pay in Northern Ireland is competitive. Now, we have met with the Minister, who has indicated that he will not pay above the 3.5%. And not only was he unable to commit to improving the award, he also was unable to even assure if it would be paid promptly. Why we have called a ballot, you will know that each of the branches of practice, doctors, they have suffered pay erosion to their salary since 2008. Pay has been falling behind inflation for years, so doctors are effectively being paid less in real terms for the same or more responsibility. Restoring pay is also a patient safety and a recruitment and retention issue. If doctors can't afford to stay in Northern Ireland or in their places of work, services lose staff, the road of gaps grow, waiting lists will rise, and we all know that currently Northern Ireland has the highest waiting lists in the UK, and the continuity of care will suffer also. To make any impact on this, we need to stand together. We need to show our strength, or otherwise pay erosion will continue. So the next slides will show the current level of pay erosion for each of the branches of practice, and you'll hear from the respective chairs on why you need to vote yes in the ballot. I'm going to hand over to Dr. David Farron, who is going to explain the pay erosion for consultants from 2008.
Thanks, Trish. So any of you that have been at any of these webinars in the last few years will be familiar with these graphs, or if you follow people like Tony Goldstone or any of the BMA socials, you'll see these going through. But effectively, since austerity hit back in 2008, where the public sector was used to fund the bailout of the banks, we have had repeated sub-inflationary pay awards, sometimes zero, and sometimes just below inflation. Where we have seen an uptick in recent years was where we had our own previous ballot for industrial action, where we avoided industrial action by going into negotiations and secured an investment of £24.6 million for consultant salaries in Northern Ireland, if memory serves. Even with that, we are still, depending on whether you use last year's RPI or the projected measure for RPI for this coming year, and that's the difference between the left and the right, we are somewhere between 20 and 26% behind where we should be. Now, everybody was hit with austerity, and that's perfectly correct to say. However, most other sectors have completely recovered. So when you look at the ONS categories, all of the other sectors, including the private sector and other public sector workers outside of healthcare, have had their pay back up to where inflation should have it. Among healthcare workers, all healthcare workers have suffered a degree of pay erosion, but actually doctors are worse than nursing staff, AHPs, etc., and consultants are the worst off among all of them in terms of the pay erosion. When you add to that in Northern Ireland, then the fact that we haven't had CEAs in well over a decade, we were promised that the CEA consultation would be launched and enacted when we made our deal 2 years ago, and we are still waiting on the Department of Health to move on that. We reminded them again at the most recent meeting with the department that Trish mentioned. We are in a completely untenable position. We acted in good faith 2 years ago when we made a deal with the Department of Health. They missed every single deadline. Everything was delivered later than expected, and some things have just simply not been delivered. And when we look at a larger or longer term scope across the water, in England, when they made their deal, part of that deal was renegotiating the terms of reference of the DDRB. So our independent pay review body was being instructed by government at the level of pay that they should offer to consultants. That's not what an independent pay review body will do. And some of you will remember the story recently where the MLA's pay review body awarded them a 27% uplift in year. What we asked for was that our body would be allowed to be independent and make proper recommendations to government, and that if it was government's will to not take those on board, then the government should not take those on board and take the consequences of those. However, even with the changes to the terms of reference, the DDRB still are not offering an above inflation pay award and still are not addressing the 15, 16 years worth of pay erosion that we have seen. The only way we can move the needle on this is to ballot for industrial action, get a strong yes vote, and hold the government's feet to the flames. Voting yes does not bind anybody to take industrial action. It does not bind anyone to do anything that they do not feel comfortable doing. And we feel that the form of action that we've put forward, i.e. Christmas Day cover, where you would have the same degree of cover that you would have on a Christmas Day for urgent and emergency, we're just cancelling elective activity. We feel that is the safest thing that we can do to patients, but still have an impact on the Department of Health and on the trusts, who will in turn tell the Department of Health to try to get this thing moved forward. It's more important than on any of the previous webinars that if you have your envelope sitting at home, you get it out, put an X in the yes box, put the piece of paper into the envelope and chuck it in a post box, not the internal mail in the hospital. It will disappear. Get it into a proper post box, ideally at a post office, because at the minute the Royal Mail isn't exactly the quickest at getting letters through. We have until the 8th of June for the close of our ballot. These dates will be coming up again, but the last effective postage date is the 1st of June, unless somebody wants to dip into their pocket and send a guaranteed 24-hour registered mail. But it is first class franked, so if you drop it into the post box between now and Monday, it should get to Civica in time. I'll stop there and pass on to Leanne, who will cover the SAS doctor charts, of which there are many, many more.
Thanks, David. So the first slide that I have is looking at the closed contracts, because we have 4 different contracts. We have 2 closed contracts from 2008 and 2 open contracts from 2021. And the situation for SAS is very similar to that of consultants and RDs. You know, the pay has been eroded year after year. We're getting sub-inflationary award. The real term pay falls. And as David said, unless we stand together and push back, that is going to continue. And it's not just about numbers on a graph, it's about the value placed on our work, our expertise, and the role that we all play in keeping services running safely across Northern Ireland. So the picture that we're looking at is showing the situation for the closed contracts. And the cash uplifts look small but steady, but once you adjust that for inflation, the real term position has changed very significantly. So all those doctors are on the 2008 are sort of worse off in real terms than they were in 2008. And I don't know certainly about anyone else, but my workload has not dropped by 25%. We're expected to do more and more with less and less, and to continue to prop up a failing health service on the back of our own health, well-being and time with our family. So this is not sustainable, it's not fair, and it's not how you retain experienced SAS doctors or consultants or RDs. Trish, do you want to flick to the open contract slide, which is, you know, the pattern's essentially the same. There was a slightly higher cash uplift in some years, but that was to counteract the effects of the years where the new contract was being phased in. And they were excluded by the government from the DDRB awards for those years, so got left behind. So there needed to be a correction. But even with that, the corrections have not kept pace with the cost of living. Our minister has said that he won't fund them. Despite promising last year to prioritise pay after he tried a buy now, pay later approach, where he was going to withhold 6 months of our money and pay us back at some unspecified date. He then paid it and said he would prioritise money in this financial year. And when we met him, he said he wants to pay it, but he couldn't guarantee when it would be paid. And that's a consistent theme. In the last 10 to 15 years, we here in Northern Ireland across the board get the DDRB award consistently months after our colleagues in England. And very often it's, 11, 12, 13, 14 months after it should have been paid. And when it lands in the tax year in which it wasn't earned, then that creates problems for us, creating tax bills that we have incurred through no fault of our own, and ones that we can't avoid through that. I think the only year that they managed to pay it in line with the rest of the UK was during COVID. So I don't want to see another pandemic force their hands. But the Northern Ireland, as David said, the UK in general doesn't value its doctors, but in Northern Ireland, we feel very undervalued compared to the rest of the UK. Particularly Scotland has a much higher starting salary. Scotland and Wales have improved the SAS career structure. They now have regrading pathways that are clear, they're fair. They have reversed the plain time decision that came in with the new contracts in 2021. And in Northern Ireland, we're stuck with outdated arrangements, no clear pathway, and trusts that are reluctant to value the experienced staff that they have doing the work on the ground and refusing to sort of pay them appropriately with the SAS contract. And some people may say, well, look, we got a pay award 2 years ago without having to ballot. The only reason that we got that pay award was because our SAS colleagues in England went on strike and got a pay envelope from Westminster, and that money came across with Barnett consequentials, although none of that money was ring-fenced for NHS, so the doctors on the ground didn't have any additional uplift in line with the Barnett consequential. The Barnett consequential takes new money and adds, I think, around 24% by some figure that is achieved by cleverer people than me. But that money is then allocated by Stormont to go where they want it. And I do have a point, and I'm getting to it, I think. Where was I say? The Barnett. Yes, because we had no mandate, we asked in those meetings with the Department of Health, we pushed very hard to look at the regrading pathway that Wales had at that time, that we knew Scotland were looking at. We asked them to look at plain time, and they point blank refused because we didn't have our own mandate. And that's why one of the reasons we need a yes vote. We know collective action works. As David says, it doesn't tie us to any individual doctor taking action, but it allows us to send a strong message that we no longer will put up with being treated as second class in Northern Ireland. The dates for the SAS ballots are slightly different because of the printing error. So the envelopes were sent out yesterday, and you should all be starting to receive an envelope that looks like this. And paraphrase a local Northern Ireland advert: if it's not blue, it won't do. So for SAS doctors, throw out your orange envelope, fill in the blue envelope. The ballot reopened yesterday and will run for a week longer than the consultant from the RD, so it's open to the 12th of June. We've got till the 1st of June to join. If there's members online that want to join and want to have a say, they've got to the 1st of June, and the last recommended posting date for SAS is 5th of June. So please, every SAS doctor on the call, or people who work with SAS doctors, talk to your colleagues, Particularly if you're new as a SAS doctor, check your details on the BMA website to make sure that you've got the right envelope, because if you've just moved over from a training contract, you might still be down on our books as an RD, so you might have got the orange envelope. And if that happens, or if you don't get an envelope, contact the email address that Trish will advertise later in the slides. So vote yes, post it back as soon as you can, and contact us if you haven't got a ballot paper. And I will hand over to Helen for the RDs.
Yes, hi everyone. Yes, so David and Leanne, they both have already talked about charts and the sub-inflationary pay award and given really important kind of context and background information to that. So I will try and not repeat any of that. But for resident doctors, the 3.5% pay award for 2026-2027 means our pay is still between 16.2% and 20.1% lower in real terms than it was 18 years ago. And yes, we are working harder than ever before. Our work has not changed and it certainly hasn't reduced. As Leanne was describing, we have two charts just to demonstrate this real terms cut in our pay and show a range of where the pay erosion is modelled. The two charts show slightly different percentages, and that's just due to how offers in the past couple of years haven't always been a flat percentage increase across all cohorts of trainees and pay points. So there may have been years when all pay points were targeted with a specific percentage, and then some years like this year when we received our late DDRB payment, a percentage plus a specific set flat payment as well, which means the percentage change from one point to another varies across the pay scale. So just depending where you are on the pay points, 16.2% to 20.1% cut in real terms pay, and that's not acceptable. As has already been discussed, it doesn't address years of pay erosion and doesn't recognise the huge contribution that the resident doctors are making to keep the health service in Northern Ireland functioning. Pay erosion impacts our pay, our living standards, and it shows the responsibility that training and the sacrifices required to work as a resident aren't valued. It undermines morale and serves to just drive resident doctors away from the NHS in Northern Ireland, and ultimately patient care suffers as a result. Pay is a key factor in making Northern Ireland an attractive place to train, work, and remain in practice. And just want to highlight pay parity as well, with Northern Ireland resident doctors being the worst paid in the rest of the UK, similar to the SAS and consultants as well. Just one example would be the F1 pay. So an F1 currently in an NI would make £35,704 at the base salary for 40 hours per week. And Wales, with their new resident doctor contract that they've just negotiated and it's being implemented, would be 40,000 as the basic salary. So all of this really, if we all come together and yes, what is delivered, the strength of that from all branches of practice will deliver an extremely strong message to the government that this is not acceptable and we won't allow this to continue. So we'll just talk, the next slide, we'll talk about what we can achieve with a yes vote if it's delivered.
Yes, and just to reinforce, why you should vote yes, we will look at what was achieved the last time in 2024. And we'll start with the resident doctors. When the resident doctor started the process, the ballot process the last time, there was no government in Northern Ireland, and many of you had told us there was no point going to ballot or taking industrial action. But this time around, we do have an executive and a health minister in place. In 2023-24, DDRB pay award was 6%, and resident doctors also received £1,250 additional consolidated. The industrial action undertaken by the resident doctors in Northern Ireland secured an additional 4.05% on top of that 6% and the £1,250. That equaled an average of 13.6% pay increase for that year. And part of the pay deal also included a commitment to commence negotiations for a new contract for resident doctors in Northern Ireland, which we had begun work on. So they have stalled while we are doing this dispute. The last time for resident doctors after the industrial action, there were a number of strike deductions taken, and that there was an issue with incorrect methodology being used to calculate the strike deductions and resulted in excessive amounts of money being deducted from resident doctors during the last strike rounds. NIRDC launched a legal challenge against the Department of Health and the single lead employer and were successful in getting this corrected and the monies reimbursed. And this time, a correct methodology has been agreed for now and for any future industrial action. In 2024, consultants also received 6%. They did have a formal ballot and that gave them the mandate to take industrial action. However, the Barnett consequentials that emerged from the UK consultants deal meant that we delayed the strike action to come to the negotiating table. This resulted in 3.26% across the pay scales on top of the 6% from the DDRB. Northern Ireland consultants had the highest starting salary for consultants in the UK, and there was also a commitment to commence work on the introduction of a new CEA scheme and the implementation of flexible pension mitigations. For SAS 2024, again, DDRB was 6%. SAS prepared for a formal ballot, however, they did not need to take such action as the Department of Health had come to the negotiating table, and they secured an additional 3.2% on 2021 contracts, in addition to the 6% DDRB award. It also allowed us to increase the starting point for specialist posts, creating a difference between it and the top point of a specialty doctor pay scale. That had meant previously the top of the specialty doctor pay scale was slightly higher than the first point of the specialists. So we found that there wasn't an awful lot of people, coming across over the contracts, taking up the new contracts. So that has been amended. We were also able to apply £1,400 to the 2008 closed contracts. This additional funding, it was also a Barnett consequential as part of the UK SAS snags. There were also a number of non-pay asks for Northern Ireland SAS secured, and I believe Leanne referred to those previously. So consultants and residents, the ballot is now opened and will run until the 8th of June 2026. Your envelopes look like this, orange. So please fill in the X. You should have already received them. Fill in the X for yes and get them posted. This is a postal vote, and please do not post this into the internal post in your hospital because it is notoriously snail pace. And also there is a prepaid first class envelope in those orange envelopes. So you don't even need to go and look for a stamp. Just go and look for a big red post box or a post office. SAS, the ballot reopened yesterday on the 26th of May and it will run until the 12th of June 2026. So Leanne referred to it earlier. Previously, it was supposed to open at the same time as consultants and residents. However, there had been an error, a printing error in the ballot paper for SAS. So legally, we did have to pull that and basically start again. So it opened yesterday. You will find, and I have heard that these nice blue envelopes have been landing on doorsteps. So when you get it, please vote yes. And as I said before, this is a postal vote. You do need to post this and not in your hospitals or your employer's internal post system. So what you need to do, and I'm going to start to actually refer to SAS doctors here because there had been some changes to the ballot for them. Get your details, check these on the BMA website, update them. We have had a lot of people saying they're not receiving ballot papers, and this is because they didn't go on to the website and update their details. Vote yes, return the postal ballot. There are people still sitting with their orange envelopes, not SAS. in their, at home and haven't posted it yet. So please post this. If you haven't received the ballot, please contact us. I will give you the email address that you'll need to do this through. And if you are not a member, please join the BMA. You can only vote in this ballot if you are a BMA member, and you will only be able to vote in any referendum on pay if you are a BMA member. So if you're not a member, join immediately. Then request a ballot. There is the email address there, doctorspayni@bma.org.uk, and just send them an email. They will get a ballot out to you. And once you receive that blue envelope, if you are a SAS doctor, it may just be slightly too late if you're a consultant or resident, but you could always try. Return your postal ballot. So how can you help the campaign? By voting yes. Chat to your colleagues about the ballot. You will also see even myself, Patrick, Gemma, members of your committees out there in your place of work. Talk to them. They'll be able to advise you on what you need to do. Vote yes. Tell your colleagues about the ballot. Tell them when it opens. Tell them to vote yes. Also tell them, that even if they don't want to take strike action, if they don't agree with it, vote yes, post the ballot, give us the mandate to go out there and actually fix this for you, because at the end of the day, you may not want to take strike action, but you will reap the benefits of what this mandate will bring you. Advise your colleagues to check their details on the BMA website. Encourage non-members to join, and again, remind your colleagues to post their ballot and not in the hospital employer's internal post. So some ballot timelines for you. As you can see there, we have literally been checking off the dates for consultants and resident doctors. So the last day to join the BMA and vote was actually yesterday, the 26th of May. You could try by emailing doctors pay NI, but it may not happen. The last posting date for ballots for consultants and resident doctors for those orange envelopes is Monday, the 1st of June. The ballot will close on Monday, the 8th of June. For SAS doctors, the new ballot timelines for yourselves. So the ballot has reopened yesterday and the blue envelopes have started to arrive on the doorsteps. The last day to join the ballot and vote will be Monday, the 1st of June. That's this coming Monday. The last posting date for ballots is Friday, the 5th of June, and the ballot will close on Friday, the 12th of June. So industrial action, we always hope that we don't have to take industrial action, but for doctors to get anything over and above the DDRB uplift, we may well need to take this action. But to confirm our mandate by law, we need to take action within 28 days of the ballot result. So as you can see there, for consultants and SAS, the strike action plan for them will be 24 hours Christmas Day cover starting at 7 a.m. on Thursday, the 25th of June. And for resident doctors, they will be following this up with 24 hours full walkout starting at 7 a.m. on Monday, the 29th of June and ending on Tuesday, the 30th of June. Employers and the health minister have been notified of these dates. So the key information that you need to check and update your details, you go to the BMA website. It's there, www.bma.org.uk. Click sign in button and it will take you to where you can update your details. Any ballot inquiries, as I have reiterated repeatedly, doctorspayni@bma.org.uk. So if you're not a member, I have posted up here a QR code that you can just click your phone camera on it to become a member and it will take you straight to the bma.org.uk join. That will just hold, I'm going to leave it there actually for a couple of seconds. So if you're not a member, you can scan that with your phone's camera. The next slides show QR codes of the individual trust WhatsApp groups for consultants, SAS and resident doctors. And if you aren't already in a WhatsApp group, please scan the relevant QR code to join the group to ensure you get all the latest information straight away. So here you will see the QR codes for the consultant WhatsApp groups. I'm going to leave them there just for a few seconds. So if you wish, scan that QR code with your phone's camera and it will take you to where you can join these discussion groups. You can post on these groups, you can ask questions, you can comment, you will get advice. We have the same ones here for SAS WhatsApp groups and the same. You can post here any announcements we have to make, they will go on these WhatsApp groups. And these are the WhatsApp group codes for resident doctors. So our next slide is some of the pre-submitted questions that we had. These are the more general ones that weren't kind of directed at any one particular branch of practice. So I'll just go through these. So the first one there, do we believe the health minister has a political leverage and funds to meet our request? Well, we fully recognise the executive's finances are under severe strain, but the continued lack of transformation over the last 30 plus years has left the system unable to cope with the increasing demand. The cost of not paying staff properly is already showing up elsewhere in vacancies, rota gaps, agency spend, waiting lists, and poor continuity of care. It's the ministers and the permanent secretaries, as the accounting officer, decision on how to spend their budgets. They can decide to prioritise pay, although they haven't done that. There are many areas where additional revenue can be raised, but apologies, it is not the job of a trade union to identify this. These are political decisions and they rest with our MLAs. Another question here, the public perception is that we are already well paid. How will you explain the demand to be paid more to people paid less than us? Yes, we are well paid and we should be, given the years of training and expertise that it takes to become a doctor, as well as the need for continual training and development, much of which we need to pay for ourselves. This isn't about being rich, it's about pay falling behind inflation for years. So doctors are effectively being paid less in real terms for the same or more responsibility. Restoring pay is also a patient safety and recruitment and retention issue. If doctors can't afford to stay, services lose staff, rota gaps grow, waiting lists rise, and continuity of care suffers. Have you any other strategy for how any pay rise will be paid other than we are worth it? The BMA needs to be a lot more creative and recognise that finances are exhaustible in a post-Brexit UK Northern Ireland. The purpose of, this is not about saying we are worth it and hoping for the best. The reality is that underpaying doctors is already costing the system far more through rota gaps, vacant posts, rising agency spends, waiting lists, and poor continuity of care, as I have repeated. The question is not whether the system can afford to invest in pay, it is how much longer it can afford not to. We are under no illusion about the financial position, but budgets are about political choices and priorities. If ministers can find money for failure, crisis management, and temporary fixes, they can choose to prioritise the workforce that keeps the service running. Pay restoration is not a luxury, it is a workforce stabilisation measure and a service protection measure. So what is the BMA asking for? 6, 9, 12%. The purpose of the ballot in the industrial election is to secure a higher pay award than 3.5%, an award that makes meaningful progress toward full pay restoration. It wouldn't be appropriate for us to negotiate in public, but we do look to our colleagues elsewhere and make comparisons as a starting point. Needless to say, we are disappointed in the DDRB and assumed that the changes the consultants recommended to the makeup and function would go some way for meaningful progress in pay. But as you know, this is not the case, and 3.5% is insulting. So we are now going to move to the branch of practice specific Q&A sessions.